The night my son told me to apologize to the woman who had forged my signature, I learned that losing your place in someone's life is not always the worst thing that can happen. Sometimes the worst thing is keeping that place by agreeing to disappear. My name is Walter Bennett. I am 69 years old, and I spent 41 years working in commercial lending in Frederick, Maryland. I reviewed business loans, investigated irregular applications, and trained younger officers to recognize the difference between an honest mistake and deliberate deception. I knew what nervous borrowers looked like. I knew how people behaved when they had borrowed more than they could repay. Most importantly, I knew my own signature. My daughter-in-law, Sabrina, had apparently forgotten that. Before I tell you how a family dinner became a fraud investigation, take a moment to subscribe and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And as you listen, ask yourself one question: how much disrespect should a person accept just to keep the word family intact? I had spent most of my life believing patience could settle nearly any conflict. My late wife, Helen, used to say I could sit through a thunderstorm without closing the windows because I trusted every storm to move on eventually. She was right about me, but she was wrong about storms. Some do not move on. Some learn the layout of your home. They sit at your table, study your habits, and discover exactly which part of your love can be turned into leverage. That was what Sabrina had done, and my son, Ethan, had helped her do it. Part 1. The signature that was not mine. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late August. It came in a white envelope from Chesapeake Commercial Finance, a regional lender headquartered in Baltimore. I almost placed it with the advertisements because I had never held an account with that company. Then I saw the words, "Personal Guarantor Notice," beneath my name. I opened it at the kitchen table. The letter thanked me for guaranteeing a $325,000 business credit facility for Hearthstone Celebrations, LLC, an event planning and catering company owned by Sabrina Bennett, my daughter-in-law. The credit facility would cover commercial kitchen equipment, renovations, payroll, delivery vehicles, and operating expenses for a new location in a renovated factory complex outside downtown Frederick. I read the first page twice. Then I turned to the enclosed summary. My full legal name appeared at the top. My home address was correct. My social security number was partially concealed, but the visible digits matched mine. The application described me as a retired regional commercial lending director with substantial liquid assets and a mortgage-free residence. At the bottom of the personal guarantee was a signature. It looked like mine in the way a stranger might look like your brother from across a crowded room. The first letter was close. The final stroke leaned in the right direction. Whoever had produced it had clearly studied a real example. But it was not my signature. I had signed thousands of documents during my career: loan approvals, compliance certifications, employee reviews, letters of recommendation, mortgage papers, hospital forms during Helen's illness. I had signed Ethan's first baseball glove after he made the middle school team because he had insisted that professional players sign their equipment. I had signed my name beside Helen's when we purchased our house on Willow Creek Road. I had signed the papers authorizing the doctors to stop treatment when her body could no longer tolerate another round of chemotherapy. I knew the movement of my own hand. The signature on that guarantee did not belong to me. I did not call Sabrina. I called Ethan. He was 38 years old and worked as a regional sales manager for a building supply company. He had always been good with people, sometimes too good. He could make strangers feel comfortable within minutes, but he had a habit of agreeing with whoever made discomfort seem most dangerous. Sabrina understood that habit better than anyone. Ethan did not answer my first call. I tried again an hour later. Then I sent him a message. "Call me today. This is serious." He finally called shortly after 6 that evening. "Hey, Dad. What happened?" I could hear traffic around him and the turn signal clicking inside his truck. I received a personal guarantor notice from Chesapeake Commercial Finance. The clicking stopped. Ethan said nothing. That silence answered my first question. "Did you know about this?" I asked. "Sabrina mentioned there might be some paperwork involving you." "Involving me how?" "She said you had offered to help with the expansion." I offered to review the lease. I offered to introduce her to a restaurant owner who recently sold his equipment. I never offered to guarantee a loan. She thought you understood. "Did you see the guarantee?" Another silence. "Ethan." "Yes," he said. "I saw it." "And did you watch me sign it?" "No." "Did I tell you I had signed it?" "No," but Sabrina said. "I am not asking what Sabrina said. I am asking what you know." He exhaled hard. Dad, she was under pressure. The landlord would not hold the space without proof of financing. She said your name was only there to strengthen the application. My name is attached to a legal obligation for $325,000. They are not going to come after you. That is not a promise you are qualified to make. His voice tightened. Why do you always make everything sound like a courtroom? Because signatures have consequences. It is just a guarantee. There is no such thing as just a guarantee. He went quiet again. I asked him whether Sabrina had signed my name. He said he did not know. That answer was almost worse than a lie. It meant he knew enough to avoid the truth, but not enough to accept responsibility for it. I told him that every document containing my name had to be withdrawn or corrected by Friday at noon. I said it calmly, then sent the instruction by email to both Ethan and Sabrina. I included the account number, the date of the notice, and a clear statement that I had never authorized the guarantee. I asked them to confirm receipt. Ethan replied 20 minutes later. We will discuss it. Sabrina did not respond. Friday arrived. No corrected documents came. No representative from the lender contacted me. Neither Ethan nor Sabrina confirmed that my name had been removed. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, Sabrina sent me a text message. It contained a photograph of an elegantly arranged dining table with candles, crystal glasses, and folded linen napkins. Dinner tomorrow at 6. We have wonderful family news. I looked at that message for a long time. She was not worried. She was not ashamed. She believed my reluctance to create conflict was stronger than my willingness to protect myself. That was her mistake. I replied with 2 words. I'll come. Part 2. The celebration built on a lie. Ethan and Sabrina lived in a large stone house in Urbana, about 15 minutes from me. They had purchased it 18 months earlier. I contributed $60,000 toward the down payment after Ethan explained that higher interest rates had placed the house just beyond their reach. It was not a gift at first. Ethan had insisted on signing a repayment agreement. 6 months later, after Helen's death had left me less interested in collecting money than preserving relationships, I tore up the agreement. Sabrina had hugged me and called it an investment in the family. By the following Christmas, she was telling people that she and Ethan had purchased the house through disciplined planning. I never corrected her. At the time, I called that generosity. Looking back, it was probably the first time she learned that I could be erased without protest. Sabrina opened the door before I rang the bell. She wore a cream blouse, tailored black trousers, and the expression of a person welcoming a guest into a photograph. Walter, she said, I'm so glad you came. She leaned in for a brief hug that touched neither of us emotionally. Ethan stood near the kitchen island with a glass in his hand. His shoulders seemed too high, as if he had been carrying them near his ears all day. Dad. He hugged me firmly. There was fear in that hug. I knew then that my name had not been removed. A man named Lucas Morgan was also present. I had met him once at Ethan's birthday dinner. Lucas owned a hospitality supply company and had recently become an investor in Sabrina's expansion. He shook my hand. Mr. Bennett, it is good to see you again. Sabrina says you are the reason half the businesses in Frederick got their start. That sounds more impressive than the truth, I said. Sabrina laughed too quickly. Dinner was roasted salmon, wild rice, asparagus, and a salad decorated with edible flowers. Sabrina had always cared deeply about presentation. If a meal looked perfect, she believed no one had the right to ask how it had been prepared. We made small talk for nearly 20 minutes. Then Lucas lifted his glass. To Hearthstone, he said, and to the new chapter. Sabrina smiled brightly. Ethan stared at his plate. What new chapter? I asked. Sabrina placed her napkin beside her fork. We wanted to wait until everything was secure. Is it secure? Lucas answered before she could. The financing was approved this week. We are moving into the old Carroll Textile Works. 12,000 square feet, a full commercial kitchen, private tasting rooms, office space, everything we need to handle large weddings and corporate clients. That is a significant expansion, I said. It is, Lucas replied. But Sabrina assembled a remarkably strong application. I looked at her. What made it strong? She held my gaze for a second, then reached for her water. The revenue projections were excellent. What else? Ethan shifted in his chair. Dad, this is supposed to be a celebration. I am asking a business question. Lucas looked from me to Sabrina. There was also substantial guarantor support, he said. The room became very still. I reached inside my jacket and removed a blue folder. Sabrina's expression changed for less than a second. It was enough. I placed the folder beside my plate. "Before we celebrate," I said, "I would like to discuss the personal guarantee attached to the financing." Lucas lowered his glass. Ethan whispered, "Dad, please." Sabrina's smile remained, but the warmth disappeared. "This is not the proper time." The proper time was before someone signed my name. I opened the folder and removed the guarantee. I placed it in the center of the table. Lucas leaned closer. Ethan looked away. Sabrina did not look at the paper. She looked at me. "This is my legal name," I said. "This is my personal information. But that is not my signature." Lucas slowly set his glass down. "What do you mean it is not your signature?" "I mean exactly that." Sabrina crossed her arms. "Walter is upset because the documents moved faster than expected." "No," I said. "Walter is stating that he never signed this document. You gave us verbal support. I offered to review a lease. You said you wanted Ethan to succeed. My son's success does not include permission to impersonate me." Ethan finally looked up. "No one impersonated you." "Then who signed it?" Neither of them answered. Lucas looked at Sabrina. "You told me he had approved everything personally." "He did approve it." "I did not." She turned to me with a flash of anger. "You knew we needed support. Needing something does not make it yours." Her face hardened. "We did not take money from your account. You placed me behind a $325,000 obligation without my consent. The business will repay it. Then you should have guaranteed it yourself." "I did." "Not sufficiently, apparently." Ethan put both hands on the table. "Can everybody calm down?" I turned toward him. "I gave you until Friday to remove my name. We needed more time." "You did not ask for more time." Sabrina interrupted. "Because there was no reason to create a crisis. Your name simply helped reassure the lender. My name is not a piece of equipment for your company." "Oh, please," she said. "You spent your entire career building a reputation in this town. What is the point of having that reputation if you refuse to use it for your family?" Lucas leaned back in his chair. I studied Sabrina carefully. "You did not borrow my money," I said. "You borrowed my credibility." Her mouth moved before her judgment caught up. "Yes," she said, "because your name opens doors." There it was. Not an apology. Not confusion. An admission. I looked at Ethan. "Did you hear her? She did not mean it that way." Sabrina turned toward him. "I meant exactly what I said. We are trying to build something." Walter's name gave the application strength. It did not cost him anything. "Not yet," I said. She rolled her eyes. "You are being dramatic. My name is not a crowbar, Sabrina. You do not get to use it to force open a door and then call me selfish for asking how you entered." Lucas rose halfway from his chair. "I think I should leave." "Sit down," Sabrina snapped. He sat, but not because she still controlled him. He sat because he wanted to hear the rest. That was when Ethan stood. For one hopeful second, I thought my son had finally decided to recognize what was in front of him. He had not. Part 3. The price of remaining a father. "Enough," Ethan said. His chair scraped loudly across the hardwood floor. He looked first at Sabrina, then at me. Sabrina's eyes filled with tears so quickly that I wondered whether she had been holding them in reserve. "I cannot believe you would do this here," she said. "You brought your business partner here to celebrate a loan carrying my forged signature. You are humiliating me in my own home. I am identifying a document. You have never respected what I do. That has nothing to do with whether I sign my name. It has everything to do with it. You think I am irresponsible. You think my business is a hobby. You think Ethan married beneath him. I have never said any of those things. You did not have to." That was one of Sabrina's favorite arguments. She could turn something I had never said into evidence of something I secretly believed. Then she would demand that I defend myself against her imagination. I did not do it that night. I looked at Ethan. "Did you know she intended to use my house as support for this loan?" His head jerked slightly. "My house is not involved." "Are you certain?" "Sabrina told me the guarantee was based on your financial profile." "That was not my question." He turned toward his wife. "Is his house involved?" Sabrina wiped a tear from her cheek. "Only as a statement of net worth." "Is it listed as collateral?" I asked. "No one is taking your house." That is still not an answer. Ethan's face tightened. "Dad, stop interrogating her." I asked a simple question. "She is under enormous pressure. So am I. The difference is that I did not forge anyone's signature to relieve it." Sabrina covered her face. Ethan stepped closer to her. Then he looked at me with an anger that did not belong entirely to him. You need to apologize. At first, I thought I had misunderstood. For what? For coming into our home and attacking my wife. I presented a document. You accused her of a crime in front of her business partner. I stated that the signature is not mine. Just apologize so we can talk about this privately. We had a week to discuss it privately. Sabrina lowered her hands. There were tears on her face, but something satisfied had appeared behind them. Ethan's voice grew colder. Apologize to my wife right now, or you are not my father anymore. Lucas looked down. Sabrina did not speak. She did not need to. The ultimatum had done exactly what she wanted. I looked at my son. I remembered the first time I held him. He had been red-faced and furious, as if birth were an inconvenience he intended to report to management. I remembered teaching him to ride a bicycle in the driveway. Helen stood near the mailbox, laughing every time I ran behind him and nearly lost my balance. I remembered driving 3 hours through freezing rain when his college roommate called to say Ethan had been taken to an emergency room with appendicitis. I remembered lending him money when his first employer closed without warning. I remembered holding him at Helen's funeral while he cried into my shoulder and told me we had to stay close because we were all each other had left. Now he was telling me that remaining his father required apologizing to someone who had stolen my identity. There are moments when anger burns through confusion. This was not one of them. What I felt was colder. Clarity. For years, I had believed that yielding kept our family together. I avoided questioning Sabrina's stories. I ignored the small insults. I allowed my financial contribution to their home to disappear from family history. I stayed silent when holidays were rearranged around her preferences and then blamed on my need for routine. Each concession had taught them something. It had taught Sabrina that my love could be used. It had taught Ethan that the threat of distance would make me surrender. That lesson ended at the dinner table. I stood and returned the guarantee to my folder. Ethan's expression changed. The anger faded, and fear replaced it. Dad, I closed the folder. Then I answered him. Then remember I authorized nothing. 5 words. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten Sabrina. I did not ask Lucas to believe me. I walked out of the dining room, through the polished kitchen, and past the framed family photograph in the hallway that had been taken at Ethan and Sabrina's wedding. Helen and I stood at the edge of that picture. Even then, we had been placed where we could be cropped out easily. Outside, the late summer air was warm and heavy. I sat in my car for several minutes before starting the engine. A person can do the right thing and still feel broken by it. People speak about boundaries as if they are clean lines drawn with a ruler. They tell you to protect your peace, walk away from disrespect, and know your worth. Those things are true, but they rarely tell you that a boundary can feel like cutting your own hand free from someone you still love. I drove home past the church where Helen's funeral had been held. The parking lot was empty. For a moment, I imagined turning in, sitting on the steps, and asking a silent building what my wife would have done. I already knew. Helen had been kind, but she had never confused kindness with permission. At home, I made coffee even though it was almost 10 at night. Then I placed the blue folder on the kitchen table and opened a second file I had prepared earlier that week. It contained the lender's notice, my email to Ethan and Sabrina, the questionable guarantee, 3 authenticated examples of my signature, and a timeline of every conversation. I had not wanted to use it. Wanting and needing are different things. For 41 years, I had told borrowers that documentation protects honest people from dishonest memories. I had watched families destroy themselves because agreements were kept in conversations instead of writing. Now my own family had turned my name into an unauthorized promise. I did not need revenge. I needed a record. At 9:47 that evening, I called Margaret Collins, the chief legal officer at Chesapeake Commercial Finance. Margaret had worked in my department 25 years earlier. She had been a brilliant young analyst who challenged senior officers when numbers did not make sense. I had recommended her for law school and later attended her graduation. She answered on the 3rd ring. Walter Bennett, she said. This is either a pleasant surprise or a serious problem. It is a serious problem. Her voice changed immediately. Tell me everything. So I did. I gave her dates, amounts, names, and exact language. I did not tell her about Sabrina's tears or Ethan's ultimatum. I did not describe my anger. Emotions mattered to me, but facts were what Margaret could act upon. When I finished, she asked one question. Did you authorize anyone to sign on your behalf? No. Will you sign a sworn statement confirming that? Yes. Come to our Baltimore office Monday morning at 8. I'll be there. Before we ended the call, she hesitated. Walter, is your son involved? I looked toward a photograph of Ethan and Helen on the refrigerator. I do not know everything he did, I said. I know what I did not do. That is enough for tonight. After the call, I sat alone at the table. I did not feel triumphant. I felt old. But beneath the grief was something I had not felt in years. I could hear my own voice again. Part 4. What the documents revealed. Ethan called 7 times on Sunday. Sabrina called twice. I answered neither of them. Sabrina left 1 voicemail. Walter, last night became unnecessarily emotional. I think everyone misunderstood everyone else. We should not damage a family over paperwork. Paperwork. The deed to my house was paperwork. My marriage certificate had been paperwork. Helen's treatment authorization had been paperwork. Ethan's birth certificate was paperwork. People who dismiss documents as meaningless usually do so after placing your name on one without permission. On Monday, I arrived at Chesapeake Commercial Finance at 7:52 in the morning. I wore a dark gray suit, a white shirt, and the burgundy tie Helen had given me on our 40th anniversary. I had not worn it since her funeral. Margaret met me in the lobby. She hugged me briefly, then led me to a conference room where a notary, an internal fraud investigator, and a compliance officer were waiting. We began with the personal guarantee. The fraud investigator compared the disputed signature with my verified documents. Even without formal handwriting analysis, the differences were clear. The pressure points were wrong. The capital B had been copied carefully, but the final letters were drawn rather than written naturally. Then we examined the loan application. Sabrina had described me as a family financial sponsor who had provided ongoing support to Hearthstone celebrations. That was false. I had once paid for a consultation with an accountant as a birthday gift. I had never invested in the company. The application also stated that I had reviewed and endorsed its expansion plan. I had not. Then Margaret turned to the collateral schedule. She paused before sliding it across the table. My house appeared beneath a heading labeled Secondary Family Assets Available Upon Request. The estimated value was $680,000. Below it were my retirement investment accounts, described as having adequate liquidity to support personal guarantee obligations. I removed my glasses. The words blurred, but I already understood them. The house on Willow Creek Road had been built in 1989. Helen and I had purchased it when Ethan was 2. We planted a red maple in the front yard, renovated the kitchen ourselves, and paid the mortgage off 9 years early. During Helen's illness, I moved a bed into the downstairs study because she could no longer climb the stairs. That was where I held her hand on her final morning. Sabrina had reduced the house to a number on a schedule. Not memories. Not a home. Available family assets. Margaret quietly moved a box of tissues toward me. I am sorry, she said. I shook my head. Do not apologize for showing me the truth. At 9:38, I signed a sworn affidavit stating that I had never authorized the guarantee, never approved the loan application, and never offered my residence or investments as support for Hearthstone celebrations. At 10:06, the lender froze the entire credit facility. At 10:24, a scheduled equipment payment was stopped. At 10:51, the internal fraud team opened a formal review. Before noon, the landlord at Carroll Textile Works was informed that Hearthstone's financing could not be verified. I did not contact the landlord. I did not call Lucas. I did not warn Sabrina's clients. I did not publish accusations on social media. I told the truth to the people responsible for evaluating it. That was enough. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone would not stop ringing. Ethan called first, then Sabrina, then Lucas. At 2:14, Ethan sent a message. The lender froze everything. Call me. At 2:31, Sabrina says you told her she could use your financial profile. At 3:05, we could lose the location. At 3:42, this is our future. Then, at 4:09, please do not do this to me. That message hurt more than the others. Please do not do this to me. As if I had copied my own signature. As if I had placed my home on a collateral schedule. As if I had brought a fraudulent document into his life. The message revealed the habit beneath our relationship. Ethan still believed that any consequence he experienced had been created by the person who refused to protect him from it. I put the phone face down. On Wednesday morning, Margaret called. The guarantee has been declared invalid pending the completion of the investigation, she said. You currently have no liability, and we have placed protective notices on your information. I sat down. There are sentences that allow a person to breathe again. Thank you. There is more, she said. Lucas Morgan contacted us. He says Sabrina told him you had personally approved the guarantee. She lied. He forwarded several emails. One of them says, Walter is taken care of. His reputation carries more weight than cash in Frederick. I closed my eyes. Margaret continued. Another email states that your residence could be formally pledged if the company failed to meet its first quarter projections. So she intended to place a lien against my house. It appears she intended to try. Did Ethan know? The email was sent only to Lucas. We do not know what your son knew. Lucas formally withdrew from the partnership that afternoon. Without his investment and the commercial credit facility, Hearthstone could not complete the lease. The landlord gave Sabrina 48 hours to provide an alternative source of verified financing. She could not. The expansion began collapsing one support at a time. Not because I destroyed it, because every support had been resting on something that did not belong to her. At 1:20 that afternoon, someone knocked on my front door. Ethan stood on the porch. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were red. His face looked hollow. Can I come in? He asked. It was the first time in years he had asked instead of assuming. I stepped aside. Part 5. The apology that did not erase the damage. Ethan sat at the kitchen table while I made coffee. He stared at the place where Helen used to sit. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, Sabrina lied to me. I poured the coffee. That does not surprise me. She told me you had agreed verbally. She said you wanted your name kept off the early drafts because you did not want tax complications. That does not make sense. I know that now. You knew enough about banking to know it then. He lowered his head. Yes. I sat across from him. Why did you believe her? His hands tightened around the coffee cup. Because believing her was easier than confronting her. That was the first honest thing he had said. He told me Lucas had forwarded the emails. He told me he had found a draft of a collateral amendment on Sabrina's laptop. The document described my house as an asset that could be formally added if business revenue fell below a certain threshold. She was going to use your house, he whispered. Yes. I did not know. You knew my signature was on a document I had not signed. His eyes filled. I told myself it was temporary. Forgery does not become temporary because someone plans to replace it later. He nodded. Then he said, I am sorry. I waited. A real apology needs room. If you rescue someone too quickly from the discomfort of making it, they may never reach the truth. I am sorry I did not believe you, he continued. I am sorry I defended her before I even looked at the document. I am sorry I told you to apologize. He stopped. That is not all, I said. He looked at me. No, his voice broke. I knew you were afraid of losing me after Mom died. Every time you questioned Sabrina, I made it about loyalty. I knew if I said you were damaging our relationship, you would back down. The words settled between us. It was painful to hear, but pain is not always an enemy. Sometimes pain is proof that a lie has finally been removed. You used my love for you to control me, I said. Yes. He cried then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. He covered his face with both hands and cried like a man discovering that being deceived did not erase the harm he had chosen to cause. I wanted to move around the table and hold him. Part of me always would. Instead, I remained in my chair. I love you, Ethan. He lowered his hands. I know. No, I said. You know I have rescued you. You know I have paid for things. You know I have forgiven you. But you are only beginning to understand what my love is. He looked frightened. My love is not permission, I continued. It is not a blank check. It is not an agreement to remain silent when you hurt me. What happens now? That depends on what you do. Can you tell the lender it was a misunderstanding? No, his shoulders dropped. I had to ask. You did not have to ask. You wanted to ask. He accepted the correction. I told him to hire an attorney who represented only him. I advised him to separate his accounts from Sabrina's and review every document she might have signed. I told him to cooperate fully with the lender and answer every question truthfully. I can help you find a lawyer, I said. I can sit with you while you make difficult calls. I can listen when you are ready to tell the truth. He looked at me hopefully. But I will not pay the business debt, I continued. I will not reimburse Lucas. I will not call Margaret and change my statement. I will not risk this house to rescue Sabrina from what she chose to do. I do not want your money. That is good, because you will not receive it. The sentence sounded harsh in the quiet kitchen. It needed to. For years, I had wrapped every boundary in enough softness that Ethan could pretend it was negotiable. His phone rang. Sabrina's name appeared on the screen. He watched it until it stopped. Then it rang again. Answer it if you want, I said. I do not know what to say. Start with something true. It rang a third time. Ethan turned the phone off. He stayed for nearly 2 hours. We did not repair our relationship that afternoon. One apology does not rebuild trust any more than one honest payment eliminates years of debt. Trust returns slowly. It watches what you do after the emotion is gone. Before Ethan left, I gave him the name of an attorney. I did not give him a check. I did not offer him a room. At the front door, he stopped. When you walked out of dinner, I thought those 5 words were a threat. They were not. What were they? A reminder. To us. To myself. The following morning, Sabrina called from an unfamiliar number. I answered. Walter, thank God, she said. We need to stop acting emotionally and solve this. I am listening. The lender is treating this like fraud. That is because the documents contain a signature I did not make. You gave verbal consent. No, you told me you supported the business. Support is not a legal guarantee. Then tell them the paperwork moved too quickly. That would be a lie. Her voice sharpened. You are willing to destroy your son's marriage over a technicality. No, you are willing to risk my home for your business. I am protecting it by telling the truth. You are enjoying this. No, Sabrina, that is something you may never understand. I can protect myself without enjoying your collapse. She tried anger, then guilt, then tears. She said she had done it for Ethan. She said she had wanted to build a legacy for their future children. She said I had never welcomed her into the family. She said Helen would have understood. That was where I ended the conversation. You do not get to use my wife's memory the way you used my name. Then I hung up. By Friday, Hearthstone had lost the factory lease. Lucas formally ended the partnership. The lender continued its investigation and referred the suspected forgery for additional review. Sabrina hired an attorney. Through him, she claimed the signature resulted from administrative confusion, assumed consent, and poor communication. People often search for soft words when the accurate word carries consequences. Ethan moved into a furnished apartment near Rockville. He asked whether he could stay with me. I said no. My home can be somewhere you visit, I told him. It cannot become the place where you hide from your decisions. He did not like the answer, but he accepted it. That mattered. Part 6. When my name belonged to me again 3 weeks later, Ethan came over on a Sunday afternoon. One of the boards on my back porch had begun to loosen, and he brought a drill, screws, and a new piece of treated lumber. We worked mostly in silence. It was not the silence of punishment. It was the silence of 2 people who understood that some conversations should not be forced before the actions beneath them become trustworthy. After an hour, Ethan sat on the steps. Mom would be ashamed of me, he said. I placed the drill beside me. She would be angry. Would she forgive me? Eventually. He looked toward the maple tree in the yard. What would I have to do? She would tell you that forgiveness and access are not the same thing. She could forgive you and still require you to prove that you had changed. He nodded. That sounds like her. It does. A few days later, Margaret sent me a formal letter. The investigation had determined that I had not signed or authorized the personal guarantee. I carried no liability for Hearthstone's credit facility. Protective measures had been placed on my information, and no claim could be made against my home or retirement accounts. I read the letter twice. Then I filed it in the cabinet in my study. It went beside the deed to the house, my insurance policies, Helen's death certificate, our marriage certificate, and Ethan's birth certificate. A piece of paper confirming that my name belonged to me again. Sabrina never gave me a genuine apology. Her attorney sent statements filled with phrases such as misunderstanding, assumption, miscommunication, procedural error, and emotional pressure. None of those phrases included responsibility. I stopped expecting one. Forgiveness does not require you to pretend an unrepentant person has changed. Sometimes forgiveness simply means refusing to let that person occupy every room in your mind. Ethan and I were not the same as before. That was not entirely a tragedy. What we had before had allowed dishonesty to grow. I had mistaken rescuing him for loving him. He had mistaken avoiding conflict for loyalty. We could not return to that relationship and call it healing. We had to build a different one. He called every few days. Sometimes we discussed the investigation. Sometimes we talked about baseball, the weather, or the repairs he was making to his apartment. He stopped asking questions only to defend the answer he wanted. He began listening. One Sunday morning, he arrived carrying groceries and a bundle of yellow tulips. I looked at the flowers. "For Mom," he said. I found the blue ceramic vase Helen had always used and filled it with water. Ethan trimmed the stems at the sink. For a moment, the kitchen looked like it had 6 years earlier. Not because Helen was there, because love was present without asking anyone to surrender. Ethan placed the tulips in the vase. I thought being a good husband meant taking Sabrina's side no matter what. I adjusted one of the flowers. "No, what does it mean?" "It means standing beside your wife when she is right, telling her the truth when she is wrong, and refusing to help her become someone she should not be." I failed at that. "Yes." He looked at me, surprised by the directness. Then he nodded. "Yes, I did." "But failure is not a permanent identity," I said. "It becomes one only when you defend it." He remained quiet for a while. "I wish I had understood sooner." "You understood more than you admitted. You simply preferred the cost of silence when someone else was paying it." That answer hurt him. He did not argue. That was how I knew he was changing. After he left, I carried the vase to the dining room table. Sunlight fell across the yellow petals, and I thought about Helen planting tulips around our first house because she believed they represented hope that had survived winter. I had once thought a happy ending meant restoring everything to the way it had been. H had taught me otherwise. Some things should not be restored. Some relationships must be rebuilt with new rules, stronger foundations, and doors that open only for honesty. That evening, I sat on the porch and watched the sun disappear behind the maple tree. The house was quiet, but it was not empty. There is a difference. I thought about Sabrina's carefully arranged dinner table, Lucas lowering his glass, Ethan standing beside his wife and telling me I could remain his father only by apologizing for the harm done to me. Then I remembered my answer. Then remember I authorized nothing. Those words had sounded like a threat to them. They were actually a promise to myself. I had signed many things in 69 years. I signed mortgage papers and employment contracts. I signed report cards, birthday cards, and checks written during difficult seasons. I signed medical forms when Helen could no longer hold a pen. I signed papers that began a career, purchased a home, and ended a funeral. But I had never signed away my right to be respected. I had never agreed that fatherhood required financial surrender. I had never authorized anyone to use my love as evidence that I would remain silent. If this story spoke to you, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who has been pressured to sacrifice dignity in the name of family. In the comments, tell me this. Would you have given Ethan another chance, or would his ultimatum at that dinner table have ended the relationship permanently? Whatever your answer is, never forget that peace built on your silence is not peace. It is surrender wearing a familiar face.